Have you ever just stumbled into something completely unplanned? Like you're just wandering around
Yeah.
and you think you're having this wonderfully spontaneous experience, but then you realize, like much later, that you completely missed the best parts just because you didn't know what you were looking at.
Yeah, you look right at something, the light physically hits your retina, but your brain just doesn't register its significance at all.
Exactly. It's wild.
It's actually a surprisingly common phenomenon. I mean, you can walk through a historic neighborhood, admire the brickwork on a random building, and be entirely unaware you just walked past a site that, changed the course of local history.
Right. The visual data is there, but
But without the mental model to process it, you aren't really seeing it. You're just passively receiving shapes and colors.
that is such a frustrating feeling when you figure it out later. You get home, you happen to look at a guidebook or like a friend's pictures from the exact same place, and you realize you were standing 3 feet from something incredible.
Oh, totally. We've all been there.
Today, we are diving into exactly that feeling, but we're looking at it through the specific, highly observant lens of a photographer.
Which is such a great perspective for this.
It really is. We have a fascinating dispatch from a photographer named Ang. It's an entry titled Notes on Photography, Part 241, Finding Focus in Unplanned Photo Walk.
And while it sounds incredibly niche at first glance, it gets to the absolute core of how human beings process unfamiliar environments.
Yeah, 100%.
So the mission for our deep dive today is to explore this fascinating tension between spontaneity and preparation.
Right.
We are going to look at how a literal missed opportunity in a traditional Chinese garden offers a rather, profound look into cognitive load.
Because what Ang experiences trying to operate a camera in an unfamiliar aesthetic is functionally the same thing we all experience.
Exactly. When we step out of our comfort zones and try to navigate a space where we just don't know the rules.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's start by setting the scene, because the way this realization comes about starts with a very ordinary weekend scenario.
Right, just a normal day out.
Yeah. Ang is out doing a mix of planned and unplanned activities. The original destination, like the planned part of the day, is a plant fair.
Which is actually a really important starting point.
Oh, how so?
Well, because a plant fair demands a very specific type of visual processing. You're in a bustling commercial environment, right? Your eyes are darting around. You're evaluating individual items.
And looking for something specific to buy.
Exactly. You are looking at a singular potted fern, assessing a specific succulent, checking a price tag. It is a highly object-focused mindset.
Ah, that makes sense. But then, as often happens, a detour completely changes the agenda.
The unplanned part.
Right. Aang steps away from the commercial noise of the plant fair and wanders into a traditional Lingnan-style garden.
Quite the shift.
Very much so. Now, Aang points out in the notes that this isn't even their preferred gardening style, but it presented this rare, unexpected opportunity to see classical Chinese gardening specifically inspired by the Guangdong region without having to actually hop on a plane to China.
And that shift in environment is, frankly, jarring from a cognitive perspective.
Because of the mindset change.
Exactly. You go from the item-focused environment of a plant fair, where you're just looking at isolated objects, to a highly curated philosophical space.
Right.
A Lingnan garden isn't just a backyard with some nice flowers. It's a spatial puzzle.
A spatial puzzle. I like that.
Yeah. Originating from the subtropical climate of Guangdong, this style is characterized by really dense vegetation, a heavy reliance on water features to, cool the air, and a very fluid integration of indoor and outdoor spaces.
So you aren't just looking at objects anymore.
No, you are inside a piece of three-dimensional art.
And what caught my attention is that Aang doesn't just wander aimlessly. Even though it was an unplanned detour, and even though it wasn't like their favorite aesthetic, Aang immediately leans on a specific structural framework.
Which is crucial.
Yeah. The notes mention that a Lingnan garden is built around 6 major elements. Aang lists them as mountain, water, stone, buildings, calligraphy, and plants.
Those 6 elements are essentially the vocabulary of that specific architectural language.
The vocabulary.
Right. When you walk into a classical space like this, it's a deliberate composition. It's a conversation between those specific forces.
Let me push back on that a bit, though.
Sure, go ahead.
Doesn't breaking a beautiful, sweeping garden down into a rigid, 6-item checklist kind of ruin the spontaneous magic of a detour.
I can see why it might feel that way.
Like if I'm wandering through a beautiful space and I start mentally ticking off boxes, okay, got the mountain, got the water, where's the calligraphy? It sounds a bit clinical.
Yeah.
It feels like treating a piece of art like a grocery list, which seems like the exact opposite of spontaneous appreciation.
What's fascinating here is that the framework actually enables appreciation.
Really?
Yes. I get why you'd think it sounds clinical on the surface. But from a psychological standpoint, that framework is doing heavy lifting to reduce cognitive load. Think about what happens when you walk into a completely foreign aesthetic environment. Your brain is just bombarded with novel visual data.
Right. It's overwhelming.
Exactly. Without a framework, without knowing the grammar of the space, your brain just processes it as a giant, overwhelming blur of green leaves and gray walls. You don't know where to direct your attention.
So without the checklist, you are just looking at, like, garden stuff rather than actual design.
Precisely. For a photographer stepping into an unfamiliar style, those 6 elements serve as an anchor. Let's look at the actual mechanics of it.
Okay.
If you know those elements, you aren't just staring at a courtyard. You are looking for visual tension.
The relationships between things.
Yes. A photographer might use the erratic, chaotic lines of the plant element in the foreground to, say, frame the strict geometric intentional lines of the building element in the background.
Oh, that makes sense.
They might look for the contrast between the stillness of a stone and the movement of water, maybe using a slow shutter speed to blur the water while keeping the rock perfectly sharp.
Oh, I see. It's not just a list of things to find, it's a list of relationships to observe.
Exactly.
So the calligraphy isn't just writing on a wall, it represents human intellectual expression contrasting with the raw, natural growth of the plants around it.
You've got it perfectly.
The checklist doesn't limit your vision, it actually gives you the specific lenses you need to see the contrasts.
That framework gives you a heuristic, a mental shortcut. It allows you to decode a foreign aesthetic quickly so you can get to work composing a shot rather than just standing there feeling overwhelmed by how pretty everything is.
That makes perfect sense. So Eng recognizes this 6-element framework: mountain, water, stone, buildings, calligraphy, plants.
Yeah.
They are observing how the Guangdong inspiration shapes the space. They are finding their focus, looking for those relationships, and then
the physical world throws a massive wrench into the gears.
oh, a huge wrench. The notes describe a sudden, incredibly heavy downpour, just a massive rainstorm out of absolutely nowhere.
Which completely shatters the tranquil observation phase.
I can imagine.
The atmosphere, the lighting, the temperature, everything shifts in an instant. The cognitive load we were just talking about, it spikes dramatically.
Anyone who has ever held a camera, or really just a smartphone they didn't want to replace, understands that visceral panic.
Oh yeah, the survival instinct kicks in.
The sky opens up, and suddenly you aren't contemplating the delicate interplay of stone and water anymore. Your brain shifts from observant artist to mammal seeking shelter.
That's a great way to put it.
You're worried about water spotting your lens, your shoes getting soaked, and protecting your expensive electronics.
Naturally.
Aang admits in the dispatch that because of this sudden downpour, they had to scramble and ultimately missed some critical shots that would have truly captured the essence of the garden.
It is a very raw human moment. The physical environment hijacked their attention.
Completely.
It forces a complete shift from passive observation to immediate self-preserving reaction.
But it's the specific detail of what Aang missed that I find so compelling. The most painful miss of the entire photo walk.
Right, this is the kicker.
Aang realizes after the fact that they completely blew past the Qilin statues standing guard at the garden's entrance.
Yeah.
And these aren't just decorative lawn ornaments. These are 200-year-old Qilin statues.
And we should probably pause to clarify what a Qilin actually is, because understanding the subject matter is the whole point of Aang's realization here.
Yeah, a Qilin isn't a standard lion statue.
No, not at all. It's a mythical, hooved chimera in Chinese mythology. It often features the antlers of a deer, the head of a dragon,
Wow.
the scales of a fish, and the hooves of an ox. It represents prosperity, serenity, and usually the arrival of an illustrious ruler.
So we are talking about a highly intricate, symbolically rich piece of 200-year-old art standing right there at the entrance.
Right.
The very first thing a visitor is supposed to see and interact with before they even cross the threshold into the garden.
2 centuries of history exposed to the elements, meant to set the entire philosophical tone of the space.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. This might sound counterintuitive, but I think missing those statues was the most valuable thing that could have happened on this walk.
Really?
Yeah, far better than if Aang had managed to snap a perfectly competent, well-lit photo of them and gone home happy.
That is a bold claim. Walk me through your logic there.
Think about it like a puzzle. If you sit down, put together a 500-piece puzzle perfectly on the first try, you haven't really challenged yourself, you just executed a task.
Okay, I follow.
But if you get to the very end and realize you're missing a crucial piece, and you have to tear your living room apart looking for it,
Oh, yeah.
you become intimately aware of every single detail of that missing piece, its shape, its color, where it fits. Success, in a lot of ways, breeds complacency.
That is a fascinating way to look at it.
Missing a 200-year-old mythical chimera because you got distracted by some rain forces, a complete recalibration of your entire process. It exposes a fundamental flaw in how you are operating.
I see where you're going. The downpour acts as a harsh but necessary catalyst. It shatters the illusion that you can simply stroll through a complex environment and naturally absorb its importance.
Yeah.
It forces the realization that when you're just wandering, you are a victor of your surroundings.
Yes.
You are at the mercy of the weather, certainly, but far more dangerously, you are at the mercy of your own ignorance.
At the mercy of your own ignorance. That is exactly it. If you don't know, those statues are a 200-year-old depiction of a Qilin, complete with scales and antlers. They just look like a couple of lumpy, wet rocks when the sky opens up.
Right, just obstacles in your way.
You rush right past them to find a roof.
Because the brain prioritizes immediate physical comfort over artistic observation, unless that observation is grounded in a deep well of knowledge.
Right.
If Aang had studied the historical weight and the physical details of those specific Qilin statues beforehand, the rain wouldn't have been a reason to run.
It would have been an opportunity.
Exactly. It would have presented a rare, dramatic atmospheric condition. Imagine photographing a 200-year-old stone chimera, focusing on how the heavy rain makes the carved scales gleam,
That sounds amazing.
using the dark, stormy lighting to emphasize the texture of the stone. Knowledge transforms an obstacle into an opportunity.
That completely flips the script. The rain isn't the villain of this story. The lack of preparation is.
Precisely.
Which brings us to the ultimate lesson that Aang extracts from this incredibly wet, chaotic detour. The dispatch shifts from analyzing this specific failure to laying out a universal rule for future creative endeavors.
And the conclusion Aang reaches is quite definitive regarding how to handle unfamiliar environments moving forward.
So Aang states that for unplanned photography trips into unfamiliar structures, you must do some initial study on the place to learn its history and background.
Which is key.
Aang specifically notes that if they had done this, if they had deeply understood the history of the garden and those 6 major elements before arriving, they could have found their focus despite the chaos of the rain.
The history, the background, and the structural elements. That foundational knowledge becomes the shield against the unpredictable nature of the physical world.
So what does this all mean? Let's explore how that actually works in practice, because on paper, there is a glaring paradox in Aang's conclusion.
What's the paradox?
Aang advocates doing initial study for a trip that is, by definition, unplanned. How on earth do you prepare for a detour you didn't know you were going to take?
It does sound like a contradiction. Planning for the unplanned seems physically impossible.
It threw me off at first, too, but the best way to understand this is to look at improvisational jazz.
Oh, I love this analogy.
When you watch a brilliant jazz pianist go off on a 5-minute solo, it looks completely spontaneous. It is entirely unplanned. They are reacting in real time to the drummer, the acoustic feedback of the room, the energy of the crowd.
Right.
But that spontaneous expression is an illusion. You can only play a brilliant unplanned solo if you've already spent thousands of hours in a practice room memorizing scales, chord progressions, and the deep history of the genre.
The freedom to improvise relies entirely on a rigid foundation of prior disciplined preparation.
Exactly.
Muscle memory takes over the mechanics, freeing the brain to be creative.
Yes. The scales in the practice room are the initial study. The chord progressions are the 6 elements. A jazz musician isn't thinking, okay, now I need to play a C minor scale. Their hands just do it.
Right.
In photography, if you haven't done the initial study on the history of architecture, your unplanned photo walk isn't jazz, it's just visual noise.
That's a brilliant way to phrase it.
Aang isn't suggesting you need a laminated minute-by-minute itinerary for your weekend walks. Aang is suggesting that you need to continuously build a mental library.
So you're ready whenever.
Exactly. You learn about Lingnan architecture, the Guangdong influence, the visual symbolism of a Qilin, so that when you accidentally stumble into one of these spaces, your eyes already know how to find the leading lines.
And when the inevitable rain hits, that muscle memory takes over. You don't have to consciously search for the interplay between the stone and the water. Your prepared mind naturally gravitates toward it, even through the distraction of a downpour.
Right.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this brings us to why this short dispatch about a rained-out photo walk carries so much weight. It is a masterclass in how human beings process spatial and visual data when they step out of their comfort zones.
It's about mental models. It's about how we filter the world around us.
Precisely. Think about any time you enter a completely novel environment. Maybe it's a new city with a different layout, a complex new software interface at work, or even trying to follow a sport you've never watched before.
Yeah, that can be super overwhelming.
We are constantly taking these unplanned walks into unfamiliar structures. If you enter those spaces without a mental model, without taking a few minutes to learn the basic history, the vocabulary, the 6 elements of that specific environment, you are guaranteeing that you will be overwhelmed.
Because life is messy, and the metaphorical downpour is always going to hit. There will always be a distraction. The new software crashes, the city streets get crowded, the environment rebels.
The chaos is inevitable. Distractions will always try to scatter your focus. Building a baseline framework, doing the initial study, doesn't stifle your ability to be spontaneous. It actively protects it.
It creates a buffer.
Yes. It allows you to maintain your cognitive focus when things get chaotic. You don't panic and run for cover because your brain isn't overwhelmed by the novelty of the situation. You already know what the core elements are, which means you can easily separate the signal from the noise.
It is the difference between merely reacting to your environment and actively responding to it.
Exactly.
If you don't have the mental framework of the Lingnan-style, you react to the rain like an animal. You run for cover and miss the 200-year-old statues. If you have the framework, you respond to the environment as an artist. You say, this rain is changing the texture of the stone and the flow of the water, and I need to adjust my aperture and shoot that Qilin statue right now.
Aang observes that focusing on those 6 elements, mountain, water, stone, buildings, calligraphy, and plants, would salvage the creative process.
It's amazing how that works.
It is a mechanism for finding clarity in a blur of unfamiliar data. We all require our own versions of those 6 elements for the complex, novel environments we navigate daily.
It fundamentally changes how you view a simple detour. To recap the journey we've taken through this dispatch, we started at a bustling plant fair, focused on individual objects.
A very specific mindset.
Right. A sudden detour pulled us into an unexpected traditional Lingnan garden, a space defined by dense vegetation and water, inspired by Guangdong. We examined the architectural glamour of that space through the 6 major elements.
The mountain, water, stone, and so on.
Exactly. Then, a sudden, heavy downpour hijacked the photographer's cognitive load, causing a frantic retreat and resulting in completely missing the 200-year-old mythical Qilin statues guarding the entrance.
A painful but necessary miss.
And from that literal missed opportunity, we extracted a crucial lesson about human perception. Doing the initial study and building mental models of your environment is the only way to truly maintain focus when an unplanned situation turns chaotic.
It serves as a stark reminder that true spontaneity isn't just wandering blindly. It is a privilege that is earned through continuous preparation.
Well said.
Which leaves us with an important question, something for you, the listener, to carefully consider after we wrap up today.
Give us something to think about.
We've established that possessing a little historical context and a mental framework makes us vastly better observers during spontaneous moments. So, take a critical look at your own routines. What unplanned areas of your daily life are you currently wandering through completely blind?
Oh, that's a tough one.
Think about your neighborhood architecture, the complex systems at your workplace, or even the local history of your own city. What metaphorical 200-year-old Qilin statues are you walking past every single day, completely unseen, simply because you haven't taken the time to learn the grammar of your own surroundings?
That is a question that demands some real reflection. The next time I get caught in the rain, I'm definitely going to stop, look around, and wonder what incredible details I am missing. Thank you for exploring this dispatch with us. We will catch you on the next deep dive.